Welcome to the Tudor Dixon Podcast. I have Kyle Olson from the Midwesterner here with me today because we are going to go through what is happening at universities across the country. They've been told no more DEI. Now suddenly all these videos are coming out and they are sneaking DEI, but they're calling it something else. And they are so brazenly telling people that they're just continuing with DUI. They just call it, or DUI, DEI. They're just calling it something else.
Right. So the Trump administration back in, what was it, January or February, they issued an executive order banning DEI from universities, from the workplace, et cetera. So, of course, the question is, well, does it still exist? And so there have been a number of videos that have come out, some in North Carolina and Florida. There were some that came out this week in Tennessee. They were on Town Hall and Fox News and other places like that. And what they're showing is basically these universities are just rebranding DEI as something else. And so they're not actually getting rid of it. All they're doing is just rebranding, renaming. And what these videos are showing is that the work continues. The staff is saying as much, that the work continues, and nothing is really changing.
The work continues. And so I just want to explain, people will have in the past called this reverse racism or reverse discrimination, because I think there's no way for people to fully understand what it means to be this blatantly discriminatory toward white children. And that's what's happening to the students at these universities. If you do not fit into one of their buckets of diversity, equity, and inclusion, you are really being discriminated against in these schools.
Right. And there's a variety of ways that that's happening, either through the policy, or there was reporting this week that the University of Michigan, Western Michigan University, are still giving scholarships to illegal students.
Wait,
and so here,
illegal students, what do you mean by that?
Students that are in the country illegally, illegal immigrant students.
And they're getting scholarships?
They're giving scholarships, which obviously means if they're giving scholarship dollars to a student that's in the country illegally, they're not giving scholarship dollars. That's taking dollars away from someone else.
Do they know these are illegal
students?
Yes,
because it's being done in the name of, helping more students, helping the downtrodden, or whatever you want to call them. And
but that's interesting, because I was on the east side of the state a few weeks ago, and one of the guys over there, his son had applied to the University of Michigan, and he said, we are struggling now because the University of Michigan is taking so few students from in-state that our kids who used to go to Ivy Leagues are now trying to get into the University of Michigan. The kids that used to go to the University of Michigan or Michigan State are now going to community college because there's no spaces. So you're telling me that our tax dollars in the state of Michigan that go to fund the state schools are being used to give illegal immigrants spaces that our kids are no longer getting.
Correct. And so the Trump administration is trying to do something about that. But what you just said about, the number of foreign students or out-of-state students, and I'm not defending this, but from the university's perspective, it's just a business decision. Because if they can charge an out-of-state if they can make twice as much on an out-of-state student as an in-state student, well, what are they going to do? They're going to admit more out-of-state students. That's how the system is broken. And then you add on top of that the foreign students, or the students who are in the country illegally, who are then getting scholarships and grants and everything. I mean, the system is broken. And so the Trump administration is both trying to reverse or cancel these DEI policies and make sure that they don't exist, but then they're also trying to deal with that issue of giving money, taxpayer dollars, to students who shouldn't be in the country in the first place.
So what I think is so interesting about what happened this week is that these videos came out, and immediately you have a Senate hearing. You've got senators on top of this instantly talking about it. I mean, a couple of them were tweeting things out. But in the Senate hearing, they're immediately saying, what are you going to do to stop this? And I think they were talking to Harmy Dillon, right?
Right, the Assistant Attorney General.
So she made an incredibly good point in this hearing, one that I don't think that we think a lot about. And I think the other side has trained you that you can't even have conversations like this. But I want you to listen to what Harmeet Dillon said in this hearing just earlier this week.
We have data crunchers in the DOJ who are helping us analyze the data, but we're also relying on whistleblowers like the ones you just referenced in the Vanderbilt and the other schools that are engaging in this behavior. And they're helping us expose the defiance of federal law. And, it's very interesting. I've heard a lot of lofty phrases here, but this is not unusual compared to what we saw in the Brown v. Board of Education era. A decree came down from the Supreme Court that separate but equal was illegal, and yet throughout the United States, particularly in the South, where I grew up too, we saw government officials openly defying those orders by rebranding and using different methods, and it took decades to root that out.
When they decide that they want to discriminate against a certain group, when there are people who are so empowered to do so, I think it's important to remember this. She points out this is no different than Brown versus the Board of Education, and that the people in the South were continuing segregation. You're seeing this now at our universities where certain kids, if you're an Asian kid, if you're a white kid, you are not entitled to the same perks at graduation. You are not entitled to the same special areas in the library. You are pushed aside for even admissions to the universities. So they're looking at your background and saying, you don't qualify for us simply because of the way you were born. That is simply the reason that they're saying you don't qualify for this program, you don't qualify to be a part of the university, you don't qualify to step into this section of the library at the university. I mean, we're not joking when we say that this is what's happening on these college campuses. And I thought that the way Harmeet Dillon pointed it out was so important for us to hear, because we have been conditioned to say, you're not going to fight back against this because you've been privileged. You've had this. You've had it for so long. Well, wait a minute. Getting rid of discrimination, becoming a melting pot that loves everyone in the United States didn't mean that any group had to be pushed aside. But that's what this woke, radical DEI group is saying. If you don't fall into a certain category, and some of those categories are if you're not trans, and if you're not out there saying you're going to change your gender, then you're not welcome in this area. This is outrageous. And it's crazy to think that Donald Trump had to come in and say, you know what, we're going to make this illegal. We're no longer going to allow you to do this. Because it seems like common sense when you actually listen to what Harmeet Dillon says. It seems like common sense, but it's still happening. They're sneaking it.
Right. And that's, I think, what the Trump administration needs to realize. And I think they are realizing that it's still happening. And in fact, I mean, at the University of North Carolina at Charlotte, one of the people was caught on camera saying, quote, "We've renamed, we've reorganized, we've recalibrated, so to speak. If you're looking for an outward DEI position, it's not going to happen. But if you're interested in doing work that is covert, there are opportunities." And so what they've done is, instead of, being proud about the DEI work that they're doing, the work hasn't changed. They've just sort of gone underground. And so what I see happening at these universities, University of Tennessee, North Carolina at Charlotte, there was one or two in Florida, Belmont University in Nashville. Basically, what they're saying is they're going to continue the work. And so I think what needs to happen is the administration and the Congress, they need to get serious about this, and they need to understand that just because they issue an executive order that says DEI is dead, it's not really dead. They're just changing the name, and they want to continue the work. And I don't know if the answer is defunding, if it's audits, or if it's, I'm not exactly sure what the answer is, but these universities, the bureaucrats and the ideologues that are running these different offices and agencies and departments, they're going to try and stick out the Trump administration and just sort of, wait for them to go away. But that's what they're trying to do. And so the question is, what is the Trump administration? What is the Congress going to do about it?
So the other night I had my daughter come into my room, and she had been with a friend who, and this is my daughter who will go into high school this year. And she was with a friend who is going to be a senior this year. And she came into my room and she sat down and she said, Mom, I was talking to so-and-so today, and she told me that high school goes so fast. And so she started talking to me about what that's going to be like how quickly will I end up in college? And she said, one of the things that she said to me is that I have to be really careful what college I go to. And I know, I know that there are going to be people who will hear this and say, this didn't happen, but it was shocking to me because it really did happen. And the point of me telling you this is that this is something now that our children are actually afraid of when we talk about the importance of getting rid of DEI. They are actually afraid of whether or not their friends are going to return from school and still be the people that they grew up with. Because she was telling me that this friend of hers said kids that have gone to these big universities have come back, they're totally different and they're not Christians anymore. And that, so in her worldview, obviously her concern is, will I be able to continue to have friends that are Christian? Will I marry a Christian? And that was kind of where the conversation went from there. But I think that this DEI that we're looking at has really eliminated the ability to have traditional values, traditional American values, traditional Christian values, because you're almost demonized by these people who are trying to say, we're going to root out anything that is what America has looked like in the past. We're going to make sure that America goes forward and that you can't lift up the different backgrounds that have been here. It seems so unlike what the left says, but if you're following what they're saying, they are actually suppressing Christianity. They're suppressing family values. They're suppressing getting married and having kids. And so all of those things, here I have a child that's going into her freshman year in high school, and she is hearing from the generation that just graduated that they're finding that kids have gone to school and essentially been indoctrinated. This is having an effect. And it's not me saying it. That, to me, that was the crazy part. I have a 14-year-old in my bedroom concerned that college is going to change her or change her friends. And where should she go? It's not that she lives in my house. It's not that she got this from me. It's not that she is around political people. She had a friend who said, my gosh, when your friends go away, they come back different. That to me is enough to say this stuff has to end.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's really just getting rid of DEI is not, it obviously it helps, but it doesn't really fix the problem, because I think this progressive ideology, this anti-American ideology is really at this point is ingrained in a lot of universities. And you'll see in these universities they're now, Belmont and University of Tennessee and others, they're now putting out statements saying, they're hiring third-party auditors to come in and make sure that they're complying and everything. Well, the reason they're doing that is because they want the federal money. But this ideology is still ingrained in the university.
But I'll say, I think that this kind of stuff has to happen. And for all of you who haven't seen the videos, you should go look this up, because there were people who went in these videos. I know you've seen some of these, what I guess you'd call gotcha videos in the past, where somebody gets a low-level employee and they go out on a date and they trick them into saying things. These are people that went right into their offices. This is on university property. They are talking to the people who manage these departments. This is not low-level employees. And this is not somebody that's drunk and out on a date. I mean, I think that's important. These are people who are actually in their offices like, hey, yeah, don't worry. We're going to defy the federal government and continue to do this and continue to disenfranchise children who are Asian or white because we believe that we have a better plan. Well, it's not the plan. It's not been the plan. It's a rogue ideology, and it has caused immense damage to this country, and it's going to be rooted out. So my point in saying that is, having this kind of accountability, knowing that people are it's not just their third party. It's knowing that people are going to continue to watch and follow up with these universities. To me, that's critical.
And I think the elected officials can't just let these universities off the hook by saying, "Oh, we're changing," because what these videos show is that yes, it's not just low level people, but it's assistant, it's vice provosts, it's department directors, it's those sorts of people, and it's those people are acting at the behest of the president of the university, the board of the university, the senior leadership of the university. And what we're seeing in some of this reporting is that basically what will happen is a video will come out, and then the university will say, the response will be, "Oh, that was a rogue employee," or "They're not authorized to speak to the media," or "That's not our policy, and that person is not in compliance." So they're sort of trying to downplay the whole thing. But it's very clear. You look at these universities, you look at what Town Hall reported, for example, or what others have reported. This is the policy. And they don't think much of Donald Trump. They don't think much of his policies. And they're going to change the names because they call it, access and engagement, or they call it belonging, or, these sorts of even more vague terms than diversity, equity, and inclusion. And but they just keep going.
I think they've never had an administration this engaged, though, because like I said, these videos came out, and it wasn't as if there was a hearing on this, but these videos came out, and it was instant that these senators were on it. You had Senator Blackburn, who is the
Senator Schmidt from Missouri,
and Senator Burchett, who was tweeting.
Representative. Mm-hmm.
Oh, representative. Mm-hmm. And he was tweeting about, now, see, that's what I would like. We haven't seen as much from the House, so I'd like to see the House get involved. And I think the House should hold hearings too. Oh, Kristi Noem, the Secretary of Homeland Security, she also came out and talked about this. I think we have that clip. Let's play that as well.
We're also seeing similar acts of injustices happen in Nashville by other entities as well. We're seeing obstruction against federal immigration law by Belmont University. As you know, they have openly said that they will house illegal immigrants on their campus and do that in defiance of the federal government. President Trump campaigned on immigration enforcement. The American people voted for immigration enforcement. They voted to clean up their streets and get these criminals out of our country.
It's been such an instant response to this. I mean, you were explaining this earlier. She's talking about these illegals that are being allowed on university campuses. But you think about this, how different the Trump administration is this time than the first time. You have people who are clearly saying, we're going to make sure that these universities are exposed. And I think it's important because most of these are state universities that are getting federal money, but they're also getting our state tax dollars as well. And they're doing these things that are illegal. I mean, that's when we had the Secretary of Education, Linda McMahon, on here, and we asked her about, they banned men and women's sports. We asked her about that. And in Michigan here, the Michigan High School Athletic Association was like, we're not going to do that. We're not going to follow that. She was like, they're breaking the law. This is not an option. This is not, we're not just playing around here. This is a law. It's the same situation here. And I think these universities, they see what happened with Harvard. They see what's happening with Columbia right now. And I think they're going to have to take this seriously because, as I said, in just a few days, you've got high-ranking officials coming out and saying, we're not going to let this happen.
Right. So Columbia, what was the fine? $200 million? Is
I think
that
it was
right?
250. Was it
$250 million?
I don't know what. Sarah held her hands up, but I don't. Oh, right. I was like, what does that mean? All right, 220.
So, which is a significant amount of money.
Yeah.
And it should set the precedent that if these universities are not going to follow the federal law and the Trump executive orders, and they don't have to like the guy, which is that's their prerogative, but he's in charge of the federal government, And if they want the federal dollars, then they have to comply with the federal orders. It's as simple as that.
We've had so many people on here that have said, well, we've had questions before from audience members like, I have this situation, what do I do? I've had this in my public school, what do I do? We've had parents on here who have had public schools go after their kids, and I'm talking about K through 12, go after their kids in a certain way, and especially with the trans stuff, be it changing their child's gender behind their back or attempting to do that behind their back, and the parents find out, and they've sued these universities for, or these K through 12 schools for a massive amount of money. And honestly, we had an attorney on one time, and the attorney said the best way to get this to change is to hit them in the pocketbook. And I think that's what, as a businessman, Trump understands that, and that's why he's done what he's done with Harvard, is that you get people to pay attention when you say you will no longer have the same amount of money that you used to have. And whether that is your local public school that has done something wrong and you sue them and you are then costing them money, they don't want to have money out of their pocket. I mean, you even saw this. So Kyle used to work in education reform, and there were so many stories you told me about predator teachers that instead of them going through the public, having a lawsuit or anything, they would secretly move the teacher to another school through the teachers union and have maybe a small amount of money that they paid out, but no grandiose information going out to the public because they want to continue to get the public funding.
Well, yes. And in those situations, a lot of times, because a lot of the individuals that were being accused were tenured. And so you first had to go through a tenure fight and revoke their tenure. Then you could actually fire them. And so the schools would see this as a business decision, and they would say, we could spend $100,000, $200,000, whatever, thousands and thousands of dollars on a tenure fight and potentially lose, or we could give that person $100,000, payout, a positive letter of recommendation to go away.
And these are, in many cases, teachers that hurt kids.
Yes. And so then they are set up where they have a huge payout. They resign from their job, so they're not fired. And they get a positive letter of recommendation. And so then it's never, the negative, their personnel file and all of that is never, released. So then they can apply for another job and get it because they have a positive letter of recommendation. They have lots of experience. And then they're set up perfectly to do the same thing that they were doing in the previous school.
And I think this is something of the past. And I hope that this is something of the past in K through 12 too, because I think people have been given a voice. And I think that these videos that have come out and the fact that we've heard senators and congressmen and secretaries, cabinet secretaries come out and say, we're paying attention. I really believe that is the answer to pushing these policies back, getting these policies out of these schools. And I think it's something that we on the right have been looking for so long, because we've been very vocal about it, but it's hard to actually root it out. And it's certainly hard if you're not in control. And having Donald Trump in the White House, that's a big difference. And can you, in 4 years, get this out of there and keep it out? And that's why the midterms are so important. And that's why 2028 is so important. And you will see a huge emphasis on that, because you've got traditional American values being whittled away at our universities. And like I said, you have kids that are going from your home, and you all have had this situation, whether it's your own house or a friend, somebody who has sent their kid to college and the kid comes back and they're totally different.
Right. And so I think it's very important for the administration and the Congress to stay on top of this. And I think what's different is that these schools know that the administration is acting like a hammer right now. And, if these sorts of videos came out in the last administration, you would probably see responses like, oh, they are selectively edited, or they're taken out of context, right, or, those kinds of things. Yes, exactly. But with this administration, these universities are responding and they're scrambling, and they're trying to downplay the responses from the individuals in the videos, but they're not saying this is fake, this is taken out of context, this is, edited selectively to make the person look bad or anything like that. They're not doing that. They're scrambling because they want to keep the federal money.
Well, and I just want to point out how dangerous the last administration was, because there's been a lot of talk this week about the Hunter Biden videos, but I think for the wrong reasons. We've seen these videos where he's lashed out and started swearing about George Clooney and all these other people. And it's always that was in defense of his father. And, I think that you can always take a clip of a video and make someone look like they're unhinged. The concerning part about him and those videos to me was his politics, because there was a point, and that's why I bring this up, because to me this is so important, because if you are not continuously in the fight, and sometimes I have worried that Republicans are not continuously in the fight for elections because there's no time off, there's no year off. Democrats have not slowed down and they're putting out their plans right now. The thing that scared me most about what Hunter Biden said was when he said, if I were in this position of running for president in the next 3 to 4 years, and I became president, I would go to El Salvador and tell the president of El Salvador to open the prisons that Donald Trump, of all the people Donald Trump sent there, and I would personally fly them back to the United States. And do you think if he's willing to fly back murderous criminals to the United States, that he wouldn't employ all of this right back again in the universities? And also, he was like just overwhelmingly praising Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, and saying like, this administration is the worst, President Trump is the worst president in history, and just going, obviously he's praising his father, but I believe that what he said politically in those videos was what we should be picking apart and looking at, because I think that he was very high up in power in the White House and his opinion mattered. And you think that he's gone because Biden's gone? None of these people are ever gone.
Well, do you think he's out of the Democrat mainstream thought with what he said?
No, I don't. I think that he is actually the new Democrat thought process. Like, he was very nasty about Nancy Pelosi. Obviously, she knifed his father. So, he's not going to be a big fan. But I also think those were the old Democrats, and he was on board with the new Democrats. And not that I'm saying that somebody's like him is going to run for president, but in this country, you never know with the Democrats the way they are. They could say, you know what, the front runner is going to be Hunter Biden. He is the smartest man Joe's ever met. So there's a chance that you're saying there's a chance, but he was out there. 3 hours. And you know what? If you listen to that interview, it wasn't bananas. It's not like he can't find his way around things. He knew the politics of it. And knowing the politics of something is in this world half the battle. So he was on the progressive side. And he said that too. He said, I think my father did more for progressives in this country than any other president in history, which I agree. I think he was bananas. I don't think he knew he was doing it. But obviously Hunter, who people believe was behind the scenes, and I'm sure, Joe openly admitted that he takes counsel from Hunter. Like I said, he thinks he's the smartest man in the world. And I think he was by his side for the last few years. He was openly saying, my father did more for progressives than any other president. And he was obviously pushing that to happen.
Which is saying something, given Woodrow Wilson and all of the other horrible progressives.
But he was saying things like, look at what he did to put money into infrastructure and to fix climate change. And we know that that was all for these fake, these, I guess I would say they were like these activist groups, activists who wanted to have fake climate change, who wanted to talk about transgender. And he talks about transgenderism. He's like, my dad, that might not have been like really close and near and dear to my dad's heart, but my dad could understand it. I mean, the way he talked about these things, to me, him going bananas and saying the F word did not compare to what he said is the future of the Democrat Party. That's what you should be listening to when you listen to what he's saying.
Right. And I think that's the direction that they want to head, which is why all of these things that we've been talking about, everything is on the line. And so everything that Trump is doing, and you had said, earlier about how he's been very direct about everything. I mean, Trump has been very clear. He was clear during the campaign about what he stood for, what he wanted to do, and he's been clear in his 6 months that he's been in about what he wanted to do, and he's doing it. And he's surrounded himself with people like Harmeet Dillon and others who are very committed to this, and they're seeing it through.
Well, I just saw, just to go back to the Bidens for a second, I just saw, and I don't know if this is true, but I believe it is, that Joe got a $10 million advance for his book. Oh, Sarah's nodding. So we're going to say that is true. So because Sarah knows all the tea. So he got $10 million. I know this sounds crazy, but don't count Hunter out in this world, because there's a lot of grace for people who have gone through drug rehab and come back, and his sob story on their side is very effective, whether it is that he is in an administration or he has some sort of a role. I just don't think that he's gone from the political game. And Joe's almost dead. He is going to bring $10 million more into that family. And I say that because he has cancer that's very severe. I mean, he's not going to live that much longer. That is sad, but that's a true story. So I think Hunter will be back.
Okay. That'll be interesting.
We shall see. So we will continue to update you on the story as we get more. I think that we may be talking to Senator Blackburn next week, so we can find out kind of the inner workings of what they're going to do on the federal government side and how they're going to stay involved. But other than that, we'll continue to keep you posted as we know. So thank you, Kyle, for joining me today.
Thank you.
And thank you all for joining us on the Tudor Dixon Podcast. As always, for this episode and others, go to TudorDixonPodcast.com, the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. And you can watch the whole thing on Rumble at Tudor Dixon. Make sure you join us next time and have a blessed day.